Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Skokie Village Board for Monday, March 20th, 2023. This evening, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Village Clerk Pramod Shah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The meeting will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Trustee Sutker,
Here.
Trustee Robinson,
Here.
Trustee Kuhn,
Here.
Trustee Johnson,
Here.
Trustee Pure Slovan,
Here.
Trustee Klein, Mayor Wenderson.
Here, we have a quorum. Next item is approval of the consent agenda for this evening. A motion is in order. Trustee Johnson, seconded by Pure Slovan. Is there anything on the agenda anybody would like to have removed? If not, call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovan,
Aye.
Trustee Klein, Mayor Wenderson.
Aye, the motion passes. By that vote, William Barney, is William here? He told me he was. William, would you just stand for a minute so everybody could meet you? William will become a member of the Beautification and Improvement Commission. Is Natalie Pokowitz here? Natalie? Thank you. She will be joining the Consumer Affairs Commission. And Pramod Joshi. Pramod. Welcome all of you. Thank you for your willingness to join the commission. We look forward to working with you, and you will be put to work very soon. Thank you. We appreciate everything that you have done and that you will be doing for the community. Next item is the annual comprehensive financial report. Jennifer Martinson of Lauterbach and Amon will make the presentation.
Good evening. I am Jen Martinson with Lauterbach and Amon. As mentioned, I will be presenting the audit results for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2022. I do want to start by thanking Julian and the rest of his team for all of their hard work during the audit process. I know it can seem rather tedious as we start with a planning meeting, our fieldwork testing, and then presenting to the board this evening, and we do appreciate all of the hard work that goes into preparing for us for the audit process, and it's been a pleasure to work with the team, so thank you. As the board knows, an audit is required by state statute to be completed each year by an independent auditor. And really the goal of that audit is for us as your auditors to be able to provide an opinion on the financial statements that are presented this evening. And we have done that. We have issued an unmodified opinion, which is a clean audit opinion. That is the highest opinion that we can issue. And it really just means that the financial statements that are presented this evening are materially correct and do in fact accurately represent the financial position of the village. So right off the bat, great news, clean audit opinion. There are three main sections in that rather large document in front of you. So I'll try to just point to some of the highlights. And I will mention a few page numbers as we're going through if you'd like to follow along. The first section is your introductory section. And the two key pieces here for the board are the transmittal letter, which is on page 3. And this is just a narrative overview or an introduction, as you may say, to the audit report and to the village as a whole. And then also most importantly on page 9 is your certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting that was awarded to the village again for fiscal year 2021, so the prior year. This is a very prestigious award. It is the highest financial reporting award that can be received by the village and applied for. And it's issued by the Government Finance Association. So we are very happy to say that the board or the village did receive this award again for the prior year, and we do anticipate that you'll be receiving this award for the 2022 audit once submitted. So congratulations to all of you. The next section is your financial section, where you'll find that opinion that I mentioned on page 12. And additionally, what I would say is probably the most important part of the audit, which is management's discussion and analysis on page 16. So this is a nice narrative summary of all of the financial information to follow throughout the report. I know that report, again, it's rather large. It's over 200 pages. So this section breaks it down into 12 summarized, easy to follow pages that's really going to focus just on key information for the year, highlights, changes from last year to this year, things like that. So really a good place to spend your time. And I would definitely encourage, if you just read those 12 pages, you'll have a full understanding of that entire document. Just to touch on 2 highlights for the year. So overall governmental fund balance for all governmental funds of the village did see an increase of approximately 67 million. And the general fund, or the village's operating fund, did also see an increase this year of revenues over expenditures of approximately 29 million. And just to point out to the board, that does include the pension stabilization funds in that number. Additionally, I want to point out your budget and actual comparison schedules to start on page 116 for the board to review those schedules as well, to see the comparison from budget and actual for the year. And then finally, that last section in the back, which starts on page 163, is your statistical section. This is a really a wealth of information back here. It's going to have 10 years of trend information for a variety of topics, property taxes, fund balances, major revenues and expenditures, some key operating indicators, things like that. So again, a wealth of information, 10 years of trend information, all in one place for the board to be able to review and compare. Finally, as part of our audit, we do review the internal control environment and would be required to communicate to the board this evening if we had any difficulties during the audit, material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And I'm happy to report we did not have anything of that nature. So overall, a clean audit opinion, very thankful for the help of village staff. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have this evening.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Have your eyes glazed over? A lot of information. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yes, of course.
Appreciate the report.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too, thank you.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is report of our village manager, John Lockerbie.
Thank you, Mayor Van Duzen, Village Board. Good evening, everyone. Item A is regarding the private side cost sharing for lead service line replacements. As you recall, we held significant discussions during the budget hearings last spring and the January 17th board meeting regarding the Public Act 102-0613, the Illinois Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act. In addition to banning partial lead service line replacements, the law also requires we finalize our lead service inventory and submit a lead service line replacement plan. At this time, our estimated number of lead service lines to be abated is 11,287 services. We are currently recommending a private side replacement cost of $3,000 for affected property owners, with the village paying the remainder of the cost. However, we do anticipate that adjustments to this amount may be required from time to time, at which point they will be presented to the board for approval along with the annual water rate considerations. Corporation Council will draft a resolution for board approval at a forthcoming meeting. There's no specific action required this evening.
Are there any comments or questions? Trustee Klein.
Is this money in the upcoming budget, or is it in there?
Yes, so the anticipated total project cost is in excess of $80 million, and so we have 35 years in order to accomplish this task. And so the village has been thinking about and planning for this state unfunded mandate. And so the finance director, Julian Prindy, has been strategically thinking about the water rate, and I'm going to allow him to talk about the specifics.
Good evening, members of the board. We are as we planned the expenditures for this program, we again took it out to the full allotted time of 30-plus years, and in that time, we estimated a fixed number of lines to be replaced, taking the cost that we know today, and then making some assumptions for increases, building that all into the water fund. We anticipate with a rate structure that we'll be proposing during budget, and then going forward, we'll be able to handle the ongoing cost of the lead line replacement. We are making an assumption based on this cost-sharing proposal today that some folks will pay upfront their share, some folks will require some assistance and pay through water billing over the 60 water bill payments that we're proposing. So including all of that revenue, including water rate proposals that we'll be bringing during budget, we are confident we can cover the cost of the program over the next 30 years.
Yeah, thank you. And Nick's gonna take a pay cut, so we got it.
We'll push his replacement last, I think.
Just curious, where the cost of $3,000, how do we land on that cost?
I believe that may be a better question for Russ, but that was the 50% of the average of the bids we received for replacing that private site. Am I right, Russ? Yeah. It was just over $6,000, so we capped it at $3,000. We do anticipate that to go up, as John mentioned, year after year as inflation and materials go up, but for this year, this program year, $3,000 is the resident's share.
Trustee Sucker.
I want to go back to what you said about how it can be paid. Can you just say that again? Like, if people can't afford it upfront, the $3,000, then they could pay it over time?
That's correct. So we're allowing residents to opt either way. When they make contact with village staff prior to the replacement, they'll have the option to pay $3,000 upfront or choose to have approximately, or maybe exactly $53.92 paid at each water bill, so quarterly, for 15 years. So for a total of 60 water bill payments, they'll be able to repay that. We're including a 1% adjustment in that rate, just because it is a loan up front, and it's certainly not the going interest rates, but it was important to pass on some of that cost to the consumers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions?
The
I'm sorry.
service work, that's going to be performed by private contractors, or how is that going to be done?
Private, that's correct. Russ will take that.
Good evening. So at this time, we anticipate there being two pieces to this replacement. So we'll have our replacement under the water main project every year, but in order to get to that 11,000 number John mentioned earlier, we'll have to replace 339 services a year. So at some point, we imagine, whether it's through internal forces or contractors, we'll have to also run a service replacement program in parallel with our water main replacement program. For example, our water main project this year is affecting 249 services, and we estimate that approximately 140 of those are lead. So we wouldn't get up to the 339 through the water main project alone.
Have we considered, or is it possible to try to lock in some of those prices through consortium or other means?
I think our goal is to, if we end up going the contractor route, we would likely do an RFQ or an RFP for that service. And then at that time, we can see how long we want to make that contract for, and definitely make sure we get a good price for that.
Okay. I'm just also wondering about other municipalities, if there was a larger volume of work to be done, if there are other ways that we can try and cut down costs there as well.
I'm not aware of one yet, but that might be something that happens because we are not alone in this issue.
Okay.
And-
Thank you.
And just to elaborate a bit on that, I do meet with the area managers on a regular basis, and this is one of the topics that we talk about. We're a little bit advanced as we're proposing our resolution, partly because we put off a water main project last year, and we want to accomplish that this year, and so we want to be able to move forward. And so we'll continue to monitor what the neighbors are doing and look for opportunities for economy of scale.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Recognizing that $3,000 is a burden to many residents, I want to thank you for creating an opportunity for people to pay it off in a 15-year process so that they don't feel the extent of it at one chunk of time. I think that was a good plan, and I thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you. So this will come back to us in the form of a resolution.
That is correct. And I'd also like to end on a positive note. The village is going to be receiving $2 million in federal funding in order to assist with this cost, and so more news regarding that to follow this week. Item B is regarding a recommendation for adoption of building code amendments. The village adopted the most current building code from the International Code Council, not commonly known as ICC. To maintain a level of safety and sustainability within the village of Skokie, the Community Development Department and the Fire Department are recommending changes to the building code known as IBC 2021 and International Residential Code 2021. It is staff's recommendation that proposed amendments be adopted to reduce the size and height requirements of Type 5 construction. This is wood frame and lightweight construction, and to ensure that larger residential buildings constructed with Type 5 construction be fully protected by adequate fire sprinklers. Other modifications presented in the attached memorandum serve to improve building standards, offer clarity to the code, and update the numbering sequence. I concur with staff's recommendation. The mayor and board are respectfully requested to authorize the Corporation Council to draft the necessary changes.
A motion to adopt amendments to our building code regarding Type V construction. Trustee Sucker, seconded by Trustee Robinson. Are there any comments or questions? Nobody.
I was just gonna, this is, I think, a question for staff. In the memo, it said really briefly that staff's reviewing green building codes for consideration and adoption at future board meetings. And so I was just kind of curious if you could give us a sense of like what kinds of green building codes are being kind of considered and being prioritized by staff.
Sure. So, good evening. The village and most every community adopts what are called the International Code Council, ICC. It makes it easy. Every community uses the same code. There was a point in time where people picked different codes, but we just about every community has adopted the ICC codes. The village has the most current codes on record available from ICC, which is the 2021 codes. There's additional codes that you can add to that, and one of those is the Green Building Code, which is ICC's work to move forward in climate change and resiliency, in addressing resiliency. So we're exploring whether that is a code that would be appropriate to be adopted by the village of Skokie. So it's a little, there's a bit of a process. We can't just package it up and bring it to all of you and suggest it. Each inspector and our fire department, anyone who touches any code is going to review it to make sure it's something that works for us. So our hope is that we'll be bringing that forward at a certain point in alignment with our sustainability plan.
Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson.
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn.
Aye.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin. Trustee Klein. Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes.
I'd like to thank Community Development Director Johanna Neiden, Fire Chief Jeff Hoflick, and Deputy Chief of Fire Nick Eschner for all their work on that item. Item C and D were also included in tonight's consent agenda, and they were approved, and so that completes my report.
Thank you. Next item is report of our Corporation Council. Michael Lorch.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. Good evening, everyone. Items A, B, and C in my report for tonight were approved as part of the consent agenda at the beginning of tonight's meeting, and that would conclude my report for this evening.
Thank you. Next item is our Plan Commission report.
Sorry.
Chairman, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, before the
Trustee
Plan Commission
Johnson.
section, just under new business, I just wanted to ask about, at our last meeting, I requested an agenda item for this meeting. But this item is not on our agenda tonight. I had requested that we discuss the appointment process for our village attorneys, which is a process that hasn't been really updated since the late 50s. So I would just like to ask why this agenda item is not on our agenda tonight.
It will be on, simply awaiting the determination of the public access superintendent. As soon as that determination is made, you have my guarantee that it will be put on the agenda for discussion.
Okay. Can I just ask, this was actually the second time that I'd asked for this agenda item, so I was kind of curious, why was this not discussed? I had asked that this be on the agenda in December.
Well, the Corporation Counsel was out. He had had knee replacement surgery, so he was not, I don't think we should discuss something unless he is personally present to be able to hear the discussion.
Okay.
So, and I believe I explained that at the time, that I think you were out 6 weeks. I can't remember, something like that.
Feels like a year.
So that was the only reason.
Okay, I look forward to the discussion.
Chairman Paul Luke with Johanna Knight.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Tonight I have case 2023-01P, site plan approval. At the February 16th meeting of the Plan Commission, we reviewed a request for a site plan approval of a demonstration project plan development in an R4 multifamily housing district at 8610 Now Center Road. The site is 1.9 acres in size with frontage on Now Center Road, Conrad, and Greenleaf Streets. Lutz and Associates Number 1, LLC, is proposing to construct a new 7-story residential building with 192 units and 120 parking spaces. The applicant is proposing that 10 units, which will be 5%, be designated for rents affordable at 80% of the area median income. The composition of the units would reflect the proportional unit mix of the apartment complex. 1 studio, 7 one-bedroom, and 2 two-bedrooms for a total of 10 units. I think I should give you a little background on the site. The property was purchased in September of 2018 for approximately $1.85 million for usage by the Erie Crown Hebrew Day School to accommodate its early childhood campus, while a larger space could be identified to house the entire school. This larger location was subsequently identified as 7770 Frontage Road. Discussions with this developer began in early summer of 2022 to consider redevelopment of 2 campuses, one located at 8610 Now Center Road, which we're discussing tonight, and one at 4600 Main Street. The private school on our project site is relocating to another larger site within the village. The subject property is currently not assessed any property taxes. The proposed development would stabilize and bring new tax revenue to all taxing bodies. A demonstration project is the redevelopment of a site for allowable uses in a district designed to stimulate redevelopment and economic growth in the area. The site is adjacent to the CTA Yellow Line and Dempster Tax Incremental Financing District. The multifamily residential space is consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan, the Dempster-Skokie Station Area Plan, and zoning for the site. The Dempster-Skokie Station Area Plan supports the village's long-standing efforts to improve district's attraction to business and private real estate development. This study reinforces and expands the village's effort by recommending the use of excess parking capacity in the station area commuter lots to support existing and future development, as well as circulation improvements for automobiles and pedestrians between the commuter lots and the retail development areas. The proposed project must be designed to fulfill the goals of the redevelopment district. In order to stimulate development, relief may be granted in the area of district development standards. As part of the village's environmental review, staff noted that complete street components and the enforcements of stormwater management regulations, the plumbing code, and the energy conservation code, tree protection and replacement, and the installation of landscaping plants. The petitioner indicated that the building will meet Skokie's bird strike mitigation guidelines and would be designed and constructed to meet green building initiatives, requirements, and protocols for the Green Globe certification. Legal notice was advertised, posted, and delivered to the property owners in the adjacent area. The notice was in order. Community members commented that developments should meet the needs for people at different price points. Additional opinions were voiced regarding sustainability with the multi-trips made by Uber, Lyft, and food deliveries. Other suggestions included the village's trustees should deliberate further and not rush to approve the project before the affordable housing policies are in place. The community needs more than 5% of the affordable units, as a comment by community leaders. Comments regarding overall sustainability, ability to complete a green roof, and add solar power and offer recycling and composting to their property was also discussed. Following the meeting, the applicant provided a communication indicating the project's feasibility for additional sustainability measures. They committed to offer recycling and composting to the by developer, and this will be included in the condition. The Appearance Commission reviewed the case at their January 11th meeting and issued a certificate of appropriateness. The Plan Commission recommended by a vote of 6 ayes, no nays, and 3 absent that the petitioner's request be approved.
Okay, a motion would be in order to accept the Plan Commission's recommendation 2023-01P site plan approval, 8610 Niles Center Road. Motion is in order. Trustee Sucker, seconded by Trustee Robinson. Does anybody have any comments or any questions? Trustee Klein.
Good evening. By your own numbers, you are down a minimum of 72 spots.
Yes.
Parking spots, I'm sorry, talking parking.
Okay.
You're in an area from Carroll to Elm, the Swift Tracks to Skokie Boulevard. Probably the densest area we have for parking in the village. There is no street parking. The 2 alleys south of Carroll and south of Crane, people park overnight there in the alley because parking is such a premium there. And to go that people would pay additional to park in the Swift lot, human nature being what it is, ain't gonna happen. So, I mean, you have an area that cannot absorb the street parking. And that's if you're only saying that 1 spot per unit, which we all know is not the case. I mean, by my own calculation, you're down a minimum of 120 spots.
That was a concern by the commission, but the developer told us that as they, pick applications for rent, hopefully, they're hopeful that some people will not have cars. That's a hope. And also, they're gonna, let them know right up front that parking is gonna be very limited, and if they need more parking, they would have to make arrangements with the CTA. So
get a
people going into this project will know right at the beginning that parking is at a premium.
The congestion, I'm just gonna repeat myself, in that area is so dense, I just can't see this one. And I'm always pro-development.
Well, again, this is why it's a demonstration project.
Well, I'd like to demonstrate somewhere else. If anybody has not seen this, after 5 o'clock, take a ride in this area. And if you want to table this to the next meeting, I'd recommend it. But you have to see this area, and you have to see the unavailability of street parking.
I agree with you, Trustee Klein, but, I guess they've done some demographics and done some research, and a lot of people these days, a lot of the younger people, millennials, are not buying cars. That's why, they would favor this site because it's close to transportation.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gershon, would you please identify yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, and thank you, Paul. Mark Gershon, I represent the developers. And I'm not gonna bring up the whole presentation. I guess it's gonna come up because I stood in front of the machine. But I wanna address that question. There was a lot of thought in this. This wasn't done, we in fact originally looked at leasing additional spots for this site. And when we really started talking with staff about creating a true transit-oriented development, it was intentional. This wasn't something where we were looking to have less parking spots. And the reason for that is, if you look at other communities who define transit-oriented development, they're looking and hoping you'll be within, sorry, I'm trying to be numbers here, in Chicago, within 2,640 feet of a CTA station, 1,320 feet from a bus line. Your own ordinance is within 1,000 feet of public transportation. We're 500 feet away from the CTA station. We have 4 bus routes that go right by our property. And I agree with you. If we attempted to make every development in that area transit-oriented development, I don't know that the market would be there for it. But we believe strongly that the market is there for the limited number of units that we will have that won't have parking available to them. We're not hiding it from anyone. When you rent a spot, when you get a unit, you will also be designated a parking spot or told that there is not one for you. And my clients, this isn't new to them. My clients, as they talked at the Plan Commission public hearing, have projects, very large projects that only have 10 or no parking spaces because they're building transit-oriented developments very intentionally so. And I agree, Trustee Klein, it's not what we typically see, but that's the reason that we've been in here for more than a year plus working on this demonstration project to make sure that we had everything necessary to make sure that worked. And it is working in other heavily dense areas where they are significantly farther away from the public transportation than we are. And I'm not going to, there's so many other great things about this project, not subject to your sustainability ordinance, and we're going for green globes anyway. Not required to do affordable housing, we're doing 5% affordable housing anyway. We've got a lot of open space here, we've divided this project out. I'm not raising those only because it wasn't a question raised. I'm happy to do so if you want. But I don't want anyone to think that this was just our attempt to reduce parking here. This was a true working effort with the staff to create a demonstration project with developers. And my clients grew up here. His first business was a hot dog stand, the Hutch, the Corner Hut, sorry, in Skokie. He knows his, the developer here is that was his first business.
Brings back childhood memories.
Yeah, mine too, mine too. So he's someone who knows this area. This isn't being done by accident. We chose a site that we knew was perfect for it. The backyard of this site is that open CTA lot. And again, it's a 500-foot unobstructed walk directly to the train station. So we are looking for a part of this building who may be the kind of people who are either empty nesters, who are young people. I joke with him that my mom lives in downtown Toronto, in the hottest area downtown Toronto, hasn't owned a car for 20 years. So this would be a great development for her because it's closer to the train than she is in a downtown major metropolitan area. So we really do think that it's properly designed for it, and we appreciate both your consideration and would request approval.
Follow-up question?
Of course.
Are these parking spaces assigned?
Yes, the parking spaces in the building will be assigned.
And are there guest spots?
There are guest spots in the development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Pure-Slovan. And I think Trustee Kuhn, you had a question also, sorry.
I just had a quick question regarding the units are set aside as affordable units. Will a portion of those also include parking as an option?
Yes, I'm not sure we've gone there, but there's no restriction on those units of not having parking. So the parking will be available to anyone who's there.
How, given that there's a shortage or not enough, I'm assuming it's first come, first served then, depending on like who needs parking and who
Yeah,
won't.
I think it's a first come, first serve option. We've made it clear in both our application and our documents that those getting affordable housing units to this property will have the exact same rights, same use of all facilities as anyone else there. And I haven't talked about the fact, as somebody who drives an electric car, there's electric charging stations here. We're doing one of those, I forget what you call them, share ride car services spots there, so people who want a car can use one of those. Again, there was a lot of thought. Your staff and the last couple of different development directors have worked with me for a long time on making, and the developer, to make sure this works. And I think you see a lot of Joanna's vision in this. And we think that's part of the reason we had unanimous approval at appearance review and at plan commission, and we're very proud of that. We think it's because we worked through those issues.
Is it a zip drive? Is that the name of
Zipcar.
the?
Zipcar is one of the brands. There's a generic name for it. That Zipcar is a brand name, and car sharing. That was the incredibly hard word I couldn't come up with. Car sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, I was downtown Chicago for a couple hours over the weekend. Stay away from the Kennedy and the Edens, by the way. Only for 3 years. That was horrible. But I noticed a couple of the apartment buildings had the zip cars. And so people are actually renting cars for like 2 and 3 and 4 hours at a time.
2, 3, 4 hours, but also I'll tell you, my daughter went to school in Rockford, where she's coming to visit us up in Toronto, and where my mother happens to live. She rented a zip car for the weekend, drove it up there, brought it back. It was better for her than renting a sort of Hertz, your standard rental car. Like you, it's something very new for me, and as a father, I was like, what are you doing? But that was 10 years ago, and I think that now that it's become a real norm out there.
Yeah, I actually took an Uber the other day. And it worked well. Trustee Pierce.
So, first I'm going to ask a question, because Ralph forgot to on his behalf, and then I'll make my comments on my behalf. The question from Ralph is, how much are you charging for a parking space to the residents who will be
I
in
do
the
not know that
building?
answer. Do you know numbers yet on parking spaces? I'm sorry, we don't have
That's
parking
okay.
space numbers yet.
Don't know why he didn't.
Sorry.
Thank you. Having said that, I also, in looking at the development, was concerned about the lack of parking availability. In looking at it and trying to understand what we're trying to achieve in the village, which is less cars going through the village and making something and building near public transportation, and trying to encourage people not to own cars and to utilize other resources, I am leaning towards understanding why that this is a good test market for us to see, because I would like to see people who are working in the city and don't want to live in the city anymore come to the village. And I think that the opportunities with what you're building would afford that, because it's studio, so one person, and I would suspect one person generally doesn't have a car. If they're living in the city now, they don't own a car for the most part. And that for the most part, they're smaller apartments, so that I think that is engaging a different resident to the village, because we're really not looking at this as a development for large families. So, and that's when I think we get into a car situation. So I think that this is a good test market for us to look at as we're trying to reduce the amount of cars that are going through the village.
Thank you.
Trustee Robinson.
Thank you. You know, I was going to say, I have a daughter who's 16, and rarely any of her friends were excited to get their driver's license. So it is a difference. The trustees asked a lot of the other questions that I had, but I did want to kind of put you on the spot, staff, just to get a perspective, which, you know, we haven't heard yet. Just kind of your thoughts about the project.
Well, I think there's a lot of plans in place that the village has, between the dumpster area plan, the sustainability plan, the forthcoming affordable housing recommendation from the Plan Commission. And we've worked really hard to try to make sure that this aligns with all those plans in place. Plans are never good if they're on the shelf. So putting this into practice is what we sought to do here.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point out, you know, I'm hearing different language now that we did, you know, 2 years ago. Green roof and sustainability and bird strike mitigations. So I'm really happy that we're evolving as a village. So thank you for all your work.
Is there anybody, oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Johnson.
I wanted to push back a little bit on this kind of the designation of this project as kind of a true transit-oriented development. I think there's been a lot of talk about reducing dependency on cars. But one of the other big aspects of transit-oriented development is increasing affordable housing near public transit. And these two issues are very related to each other because the rate of car ownership goes up with household income. So the folks who most need easy access to public transportation are our lower and moderate income residents who are less likely to have a car. So I've made these kind of similar comments on similar developments. These multifamily neighborhoods near the Dempster and the Oakton CTA station, these are truly some of the most affordable neighborhoods in Skokie, if not the entire North Shore. In terms of the bedroom mix, 75% of the units in this building are going to be one bedrooms or studios. Only 25% of the units will be two bedrooms. There will be no larger units. So this building is kind of by design pretty exclusive of families with children. And in terms of affordability, we're talking about 5% of units at rents affordable at 80% of area median income, which would still mean that 95% of the units in this building would be at rents above our area median income. So I just want to say, Johanna mentioned this really briefly, but our staff and our Plan Commission just last week finalized some affordable housing recommendations that we're going to receive pretty soon. And one of the recommendations is for an inclusionary housing ordinance that would mandate that, that would mandate that a building of this size would have at least 10% of units designated at affordable rents. And in that 10%, it'd be split 50-50 between units at 80% AMI and 60% AMI. So in terms of affordable housing, this building will have less than half of the already kind of pretty minimal requirement that's been recently recommended by our staff and our plan commissioners.
And I would comment that this is the challenging piece of adopting new policy for any municipality. You're in this intermediate period where these developers, as I understood it, have been working for quite some time before this policy was even the sparkle in the eye of the board in terms of what you wanted to do to move forward here. So changing the goalpost is always challenging for any developer to do. The other thing I would highlight is there's quite a bit of literature that often the people who need cars, access to vehicles, are actually low and moderate income individuals, because their employment opportunities are often during hours when there is not public transportation available. They're in off hours, or they're in places where trains or buses don't always go, or they work multiple jobs and they don't have the time to. Our radial system of transportation doesn't lend itself well to east-west. So I would offer, I think everybody needs a little bit of everything, and low, moderate income people do need still access to their cars. Certainly being near the train helps with that, but I think this development team is acknowledging that just because they are going to provide affordable housing, it doesn't necessarily mean that those people are going to come without a car. And I think they're going to do their best to make sure that people have equitable access to the resources of this building.
Sure.
To add one more thing, and Johanna, thank you. I do believe in process, and I understand that we're in the middle of creating process, and the process is not in place. So I thank the developers for looking at the village and respecting what we're trying to achieve. And maybe 5% is not what we're seeking in the future, but until we have a plan in place, and I think that we have to move forward on this new development, and I don't think we can penalize those who've been in the pipeline for a great deal of time.
Mayor. I just wanted to kind of add to what Trustee Pierce-Logan said. Am I on? Just kind of knowing, I'm anxiously looking, Mr. Luke. I'm looking forward to the recommendations from the housing.
We're working hard on it.
I know you are, and I thank you for your work, but I too agree. I know that there are some things in the pipeline already. My hope and wish when I even made the recommendation to have those hearings was new, brand new housing projects that were coming.
And that report most likely will be coming to the board April 17th. Everybody can make note of that. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address? If not, call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
I vote nay.
Trustee Pure Slovin,
Aye.
Trustee Klein,
I vote nay.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes.
That concludes
Thank
my
you.
report. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the 2023-24 Community Development Grant Public Hearing Number 4.
Hello. Okay. So there is not a report other than to let you know that we previously indicated that this would come back for the public hearing for at this meeting. However, on the guidance of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are moving that to April 17th because they gave us our entitlement amount in advance of their schedule that they normally would give us. So we have the amount. So we've put that in. We had it, and our action plan is on the website for review if anyone would like to comment. And then we'll come back on the 17th for you all to review and consider adoption.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to address the village board?
Mayor, what is a public access superintendent?
Her name is Ms. Kim, if I remember correctly. She is the head of the Public Access Department within the Attorney General's office.
But what is that? Why would that
It
stop comments? I don't
It
understand.
supervises the Open Meetings Act, and a complaint was lodged with her about a potential violation of the Open Meetings Act. So the person who made the claim asked for an extension of the time in which he could file a reply. So we're waiting for that.
You mean the Ethics Commission?
No,
No,
this is
something
the
else?
Illinois
Okay.
Attorney General's office.
Okay, that's okay. I totally don't understand. But I'd also like to say that I believe there was another point where Trustee Johnson asked for something to be on the agenda, and it just never came up. He wanted to discuss how commissioners were appointed, and that also didn't appear. That was, I think, last year sometime?
It did appear. In
Oh, it did appear?
In
Oh,
late
okay, sorry.
October, I made 2 requests, one for the first meeting in December, one for the second meeting in December. We discussed at our first meeting in December the appointment process for commissioners, and then we
Okay.
did not discuss our appointment process for village attorneys. That was moved to an executive session, and that's why we're being
Oh,
invested.
I don't even remember that discussion. Maybe that was the day I missed. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I appreciate you listening to me a couple meetings ago when I pointed out that one of the Plan Commission trustees hadn't been here for over a year, and I assume you asked her to resign, and then we have a new Plan Commissioner. I just wanted to point out something, because I got my mail-in ballot. Do you know what a township school trustee is? Have you heard of that post? You have? I mean, I know what it is, but why don't you tell us what
yes.
it is?
Well, it's the person who is, or person, I don't know if they still have, there used to be 3.
There are 3.
uh,
One is up for reelection this year, an incumbent. Mhm.
And they oversee the money that comes in for the schools. Frankly, they do, it's an accounting procedure.
Oh,
That's all I
exactly.
know.
Exactly.
That's all I know.
But I found that in August of 2021, and I can read you the new village code, if someone is an elected official, they may not be on a commission. So I ask you to ask Mike Shaw to resign, and find another commissioner. Because even if, well, he will win this election, but he's an incumbent, he's on
Okay.
the board now,
Okay.
and he should not be on the board.
Yeah.
I mean, per village code.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Wait a minute.
Good evening.
Just 1 second, please. We don't register approval, we don't jeer, isn't a sporting event. So please, everybody will be accorded respect and an opportunity to speak. Yes,
Good evening. My name is Stephen Franklin. My wife Cindy and I have been residents of Skokie for 33 years. Both of us are retired from positions in the private sector, and we each have served on village commissions and held leadership roles in local organizations. Over these decades, we've found Skokie to be a very welcoming and satisfying community in which to live and raise our family. Skokie stands out in positive ways. Abundant new commercial construction attests to renewed economic development. And the most recent independently conducted triennial Skokie Community Survey indicated a continued high level of resident satisfaction, both directly and relative to other communities relied on as benchmarks. Beside its highly regarded parks, schools, and library, Skokie is notable as the first community in the entire United States to have nationally accredited fire, police, and public works departments. And the Skokie Health Department is just one of 7 state-certified municipal health departments in Illinois. During the worst of the COVID pandemic, the Skokie Health Department provided village residents tens of thousands of vital inoculations. The village's debt rating is AA+, AA1, and amazingly, defying the inflation that over the past 30 years has averaged more than 2.5% per annum, the village is perhaps unique in having held constant since 1990 the absolute dollars it raises via residents' property taxes. These accomplishments are neither coincidental nor by accident. I cite them deeply appreciating the leadership, planning, and service provided by Mayor Van Duzen, current and past village trustees, senior village staff, and the myriad community volunteers whose efforts and diligence redound to benefit us all. No one is serving in these municipal roles to get rich, and to my knowledge, rarely, if ever, has anyone used service to the village of Skokie as a stepping stone to higher office. For certain, none of our fellow citizens take on these responsibilities expecting to be targeted for abuse, harassment, and innuendo from members of the public. Observing village board meetings over the past year, I have been appalled by the disrespect and contempt a handful of community residents have directed toward the mayor, trustees, legal department, and senior staff. These individuals seem to think that volume and ugly remarks can substitute for reason. Most of us learned in elementary school and on in life that comportment matters. Especially at the local level, we residents owe thanks and, minimally, one might hope, cooperation to fellow citizens who take on civic roles. Beyond believing them wrong, misinformed, and shameful in themselves, I'm very concerned that the distortions and hurtful conduct and expressions we recently have seen from the floor will dissuade thoughtful citizens from stepping up to take on public responsibilities in the future. Thank you.
thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Rosen. I've lived at my home on Keystone Avenue with my husband for more than 30 years. I'm proud to be a Skokie resident. I understand how difficult it is to be in your position. I served on the Skokie 73.5 school board for 7 years. I know some of you personally. I'm grateful to all of you for giving of your time and your talents and for making Skokie a great place to live, just like the gentleman prior to me expressed. I do, though, have some concerns that I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to echo the concerns that Trustee Johnson and other community members expressed about the process for appointing the Village Corporation Council. I watched the last board meeting where Mayor Van Duzen defended the process by saying that it's kind of equivalent to Joe Biden appointing the Attorney General. And, you know, I thought about it, and it's like, okay, but it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, right? Our federal and local forms of government are different. There's different underlying rules and structures. So the U.S. Constitution provides for Joe Biden to appoint cabinet members. But Skokie, I know, takes pride on, I've heard you express it a number of times, Mayor Van Duzen, in its professional council manager form of government. And so, you know, it's like, what exactly is a structure that provides for the governance in a council manager form of government? So I started doing some research after the last board meeting. And actually, to my surprise, I came across that there is actually a state ordinance that that governs the way that council manager governments are to be set up when they're chosen by referendum by the people, which I guess it was in 1957. Skokie voters voted to institute the form of government. And so the state statute, well, I found a 2019 memo. It was written by a law firm, I think at the request of the Illinois City County Management Association. And I brought it with me, and I'm happy to leave it with you tonight. And if I'm reading and understanding it correctly, and maybe I'm wrong, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to clearly spell out the rules that Skokie and other municipalities are required to follow, like under the state statute. And so the memo states that the only village employee that the mayor and trustees have the power to appoint is the village manager. All other department heads must be hired by the village manager based on fitness and merit. In fact, there was even a 1976 Illinois Supreme Court case involving another community, which ruled that the ability to hire a village attorney must remain with the village manager. And this memo that I found by the law firm, and I quote, said, "The case clarifies that the manager's administrative and executive powers are non-negotiable. So long as the municipality operates under a manager form of government, it's a manager that has the exclusive authority to hire and fire department heads." So again, if I'm not understanding it correctly, you know, that may be correct, because I noted also in the Skokie Village Code that there is a provision that gives the mayor the authority to appoint the Village Corporation Council. And it seems then that there's a direct conflict, right, between the...
I recommend a village council. The village board does the appointing through a consent process by voting.
Right, but it's not done the same way other department heads are chosen, right, which is by the village manager.
The village board appoints the corporation council and the village manager.
So
And
in
the
this memo
manager
that I read,
from a law firm.
it's supposed to be, yeah, and that's how I understood. I'm going to leave it with you. And
Please
there's-
do.
Okay, okay. But even if I can go on, even if the state statute doesn't apply here, I do think that there's some serious ethical and conflict of interest concerns with respect to the corporation council and the other village attorneys holding dual roles, both as village employees and then having leadership roles with other with the political party that slates all the candidates. So to go back to your analogy, it's like, you know, if you can appoint, you know, Joe Biden appoints the attorney general then doesn't slate all the candidates for House and Senate in a non-transparent process, and also make sure that they're, you know, the rule is that in Skokie, I believe they're first on the ballot if you're on the caucus party. So I don't know, it seems that there's conflict of interest here, and it's just, there should be something in the village code that should prohibit village employees also having authority over appointing the trustees who then, you know, are following their recommendations and approving their salaries. So under the professional code of ethics that village managers are required to follow, there's a statement that all village managers have to refrain from all political activities which undermine public confidence in professional administrators, and also refrain from participation in the election of the members of the employing legislative body. So I would encourage that the village board consider adding to the village ethics code, or the village code, a similar statement that just prohibits employees in the corporation council's office or any leadership office in the village from participating in the Skokie electoral politics process. And that would, you know, then clear up the question of a conflict of interest. So I appreciate your giving me the time
There are
to.
people who want to speak.
I appreciate your giving me the time to speak, and I'm happy to give you this memo.
Please.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello. Just some background information. I'm an independent financial advisor for families with special needs. I also have
We have your name, please.
Tony.
Okay.
Yes. I also have cerebral palsy myself. Last Tuesday, I was at the Chipotle on Skokie Boulevard, Skokie and Gulf Road, and I pulled in, and there was a sedan in the section off portion of the handicap space. I pulled into the space, went in, they stayed there. I called it in as I usually do, and you know, they left before law enforcement could come, and I stayed there to eat, and approximately 25 minutes before someone showed up, which I understand. Parking violations are not an emergency. It's just parking citations. And I went to leave. The enforcement officer showed up, and then I noticed the Jimmy John's right next door. There's another handicap parking space. Both that space and the section off portion of that space was filled by the delivery driver of Jimmy John's, and presumably and confirmed an employee of Jimmy John's. And as the cop came around, one of the employees came out, "Oh, I was only here a few minutes." Obviously not the case. I had been there for an hour eating, half hour waiting for the police to show up. No tickets were issued. Went to go leave a few minutes later after the officer left. Then a minivan came in, parked in the Jimmy John spot, went in swiftly, came out. I took a picture of the license plate, went to Skokie Police Department to ask if I could, I don't know, file a report or what have you. And I was told that parking citations cannot be issued retroactively, even with proof. And so my question to you all is a proposed solution on kind of issuing those citations retroactively, or changing the ordinance somehow to keep those people more accountable. Because calling in and most of those times people park in those spots, "Oh, I'm going to be there quickly," or "I'm at a grocery store, I'm going to be there 10 minutes. Response time is usually more than that time, because again, it is not an emergency. So something like a retroactive citation with evidence seems reasonable. I don't know the bounds of which those rules can be changed, but I don't think you know, having law enforcement be more vigilant about going out and looking for those violators is acceptable, just because when enforcement officers see those violations, they're ticketed or not, but those violations usually happen when no police are around. So I just wanted to get some opinion from you all on that.
I don't know who would adjudicate a retroactive ticket, but the other thing is, how would you find the person? I mean, how do you know who was driving the car at the time? I don't know. I've never. This is a first, so I should
Well,
probably
I mean,
just say nothing.
the registered owner of the vehicle could receive the ticket. You know, I'm not. You can't be sure that they're driving unless the person is in the
Right.
picture, right? But
Yeah.
you know, whoever's responsible. I mean, the registered owner of the vehicle should be responsible for where the vehicle goes, I would think. So, you
Yeah,
know,
you're right.
So that's what I was thinking. But
Let us discuss it. If you would like, you could leave your phone number with Ms. Luke, and
sure. Thank you.
thank you. You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Louis Mercer. I'm a 10-year resident of Skokie and a former Human Relations Commissioner. I come today to urge the Village Board to ensure that the legal department be free from political conflicts. Ethical behavior is incumbent upon all public servants. I am a District 73.5 school board member, and while I can only speak from the I perspective here, and in no way am I speaking for the board in this capacity today, I want to describe how careful we are on our board to be ethical. We always work hard to ensure that our behavior is ethical. We vigilantly police ourselves when we're in closed session. We do only talk about what we're supposed to talk about in closed session, and we admonish each other and tell each other to stop when we're talking about public issues in our closed sessions. We clearly communicate our meetings and follow all open meeting laws. Those of us who are running campaigns ensure that we never talk about those campaigns during our meetings or even on school grounds. We are even careful in our group texts. We don't talk about any public matters in our group texts. Mostly we just talk about what to order from Dengios. And this is the bare minimum of ethical behavior that we abide by because we know the trust of our constituents is important and our constituents deserve ethical representatives. When I heard about the violations of the Open Meetings Act by the Ethics Committee of the Village, I was certainly concerned. Looking at the particular complaints, one of bribery and another of collusion to disrupt a citizen-led effort and block it from the ballot, I was reminded of why it is so important that we have nonpartisan staggered elections like we do in our school district, 73.5. It's because Skokians deserve to have constituents that are free from political collusion. And when the village attorney is also a member of the Skokie Caucus Board, it is unsurprising that the ethics committee of that board dismissed the only independent village board members' complaints in illegal closed meetings. I encourage the village board to rewrite the appointment process for the village attorneys to ensure that we get politics out of our legal department. Back in my capacity of a board member, I do look forward to continuing to work with the board on important initiatives to grow development in our district, 73.5, and to help ease the burden on our taxpayers by growing our tax base and ensuring that we have good relationship in the future. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Brozek. I live in the Optima apartment complex. I filed a public comment. I'll be brief. Maybe at the next meeting or in the future I'll say more. But I just want to highlight two things. I think I stand shoulder to shoulder with Trustee Johnson because I think he's being bullied. I cited two instances, I won't repeat them here, of how he's been bullied. And second of all, I think what he says about an appointed village council makes sense. I agree with the prior speaker. The one solution, I also hate this cancel culture where someone gets fired, but I'm 71 years old, Mr. Lorge and Mayor Van Duzen are old guys too. We're not gonna be around forever. And I don't wanna see Corporation Council Lorge canceled or fired, but I think in the future, Trustee Johnson makes a lot of good points. This speaker makes points. I put in my memo, public comment, why the mayor's not served by having someone that close to him. I think he's better served by having an independent, not from the opposite party, but an independent council. And I think we should think about that in the future, maybe not in the immediate future, because no one should be canceled or fired, but maybe when the mayor, me, and Mr. Lorge are no longer on the scene, maybe the younger guys, Trustee Robinson, Trustee Johnson, could make changes for the future. Thank you.
Des Cristobal. As a member of Go Green Skokie,
I am deeply concerned that the politicization of our village legal department is a hindrance to our sustainability agenda. I am here tonight to show support for Trustee Johnson's move for a nonpartisan corporation counsel's office.
Evening, Brian Clark. I live on the 7907 trip in Skokie. Been there for over 30 years. I'm a lawyer by training. Professionally, I've been working in the environmental field for almost my entire career. Right now in the water and wastewater space, I can tell you that the $3,000 cap that you all voted on tonight is a very reasonable amount of money. Many municipalities have to charge their residents much more for the tap to go from the house to the main in order to achieve a lead-free environment. So I'm all in favor of that. I think if you can accelerate the lead replacement, you have an opportunity to take advantage of federal funding that's available now through the recent bills passed by the Biden administration. So I'd urge the possible acceleration of that. I'd also support the efforts that are being made recently with regard to sustainability and green building codes. Climate change is upon us, as we all know, so it's absolutely essential. I'm glad that the developers of this recently approved project are considering those things. Certainly support the idea of more affordable housing, so I'm anxious to see that code adopted. I guess finally I would say, in echoing the comment from the gentleman who made a statement about civility in village government, I agree that you all take a significant level of abuse, and the pay is not worth it. One of the things that I would urge you to think about, however, is, you know, I would say for the most part, I've not, I won't say I haven't paid attention to village government, but I've always felt very proud of the fact that the village has operated in a very effective way. I think that that has changed in the last few years. We all know there's a level of trust deficit in government right now at every level. And I think it comes from the fact that people don't feel that their voices are adequately heard. It's really important to stay open and transparent. The topic, of course, tonight is the question of the replacement or the appointment of the new corporation counsel whenever that time comes. Transparency, following the state law, trying to find a way to do this in a way that gives people an opportunity to feel like their voice is heard and that the system is not closed, is critical. There's a reason why those resolutions were passed in the past election to go with a very different structure of governance. It's because many, many people felt that the system had been closed off to them. I really urge you to think about, and I appreciate the mayor's comment that the topic will be brought up at a later meeting. I'm sure you'll be hearing from interested residents about that. I'd urge you to think about following the state statute, as Ms. Rosen outlined, finding a way to work together to have a truly independent council appointed. The Corporation Council's position here has always been viewed as very important, been filled by very many able people, including Mr. Lorge. You need to keep that concept of independence as clear as you can make it. Thank you.
I finally made it. My name is Michael Irwin. I lived in this village for about 43 years. Originally came from Chicago, so I know what it's like to grow up in the city of Chicago and have run-down neighborhoods, okay? So I moved here for a better neighborhood. I might not have made the money I made in Chicago, but yet I made a good community, and it's been a good community even when we had Albert Smith, the mayor, prior to you, sir. My issue today is, some time ago, around 6 years now, it's been that long that I tolerated this. Street cleanings, signs. The issue was we removed them because of the cost that we had to absorb, I guess, regarding putting up these signs that says, no parking. We have to clean these streets. Yes, we are a good community. We want to keep these streets clean. Well, all of a sudden, about 6 years ago, we stopped doing that for that reason. Now, I've been going to the streets in sand and asking them, why can't we bring that back? Well, I gave up after a while, but then again, I bounced back, okay? So now I'm back here and I'm attacking the street signs for street cleaning, okay? I live on Central Park. I have a fire station right down the street, a brand new fire station that, you know, and I have two schools, Crown School, which is a Jewish school, and Middleton School. I'm right in the middle of all of that, which is great because now I don't have any buildings on the other side of me. So I have a beautiful way to live, okay? But I want to keep it that way. And for that 6 years, I'm out there sweeping the street like I work for you guys. Because I can't get the street cleaner to clean in front of my house because there's always a car there. And you say, always a car there? There's got to be a time in 6 years that there was never a car there. Well, we have a couple buildings on our block that are not duplex. I do live in a duplex. I have half, okay? Half. Another guy has the other half. And there's a few other of them like that. Well, the duplex next to me has 5 cars. 5 cars for one half. The other one has 1 car, which is reasonable for that. We can't say how many cars they have, but you know what? That's a problem. And then we have these buildings that turned a garden apartment, which was illegal in the days when I lived here 40-some years ago. It wasn't a garden apartment, but it turned into a garden apartment. And there's 2 structures like that. That's a burden on the community in regards to the trash that they put out, which is overflowing. And we can't control the rat issues because the people do not want to participate the right way. Put the garbage in the bags. And I even asked the village to give this particular house another garbage can, and they did. They brought it down to us. Our services are great here. They go out of their way to please us. But we got to also look at the things of what you guys mentioned when you says, before you come to my community and build these high-rises, give us parking spaces. Give us that reasonable rent for those other people that can't afford it. You're hitting on the right things, you guys. I got to commend you for that part. But the sign issue has to come back because half of my block will never move the whole summer long. It will not move because they have 5 or 6 cars in an apartment. That's one apartment. So we're overloaded with cars, and we have no way to deal with it because that's just the way it is. So if we put up a sign like we had in the olden days, they'll get out of their butts and they'll move their cars. They will. They'll move them on the other side. They'll move them. But without a sign, they won't move them. So like I say, for the longest period of time, half of my block, there's all cars on it all the time. So Mr. Street Cleaner comes around and he says, well, this is an easy block. I only got to go this end and over here, and I'm done because I can't do no more. He wants to do his job right, but we got to let him do his job right. So that's the issue on the street cleaners, sirs. And to me, it's been going on a long time, and it needs to be addressed because we've gotten out of hand with all these cars. They're just like abandoned, but they're not because these people have more than 1 car. Each one has more than 1 car these days. They're a backup. You have 4 people in your family, you can't tell how many cars there are. Okay, so we're going to go on. The next issue, unfortunately, it's like we call you up and we say, hey, could you come out to our alley and grade it? Because the people run up and down the alleys and there's potholes and it creates an issue a couple times a year that you have to do it. And you guys come out and you do it. That's fine. But then we got neighbors that say, hey, can you cut the alley down? Well, you might cut it down this way to please that guy, because he put a foundation and built his own garage, and his foundation is too low, so there's water on his patio, which is his apron, okay? There'll be water on it from time to time. He built it. He put the foundation in. That's his call. I called Danley. He did my garage. I'm up high. You do it the right way, you don't have to worry about that kind of a problem, okay? So then my other neighbor around me decides, oh, I gotta have the patio look with the blocks. And I don't take it from anybody to do that kind of stuff. But if your land goes like this in your yard, let's build it up a little bit, because now it floods all the time. And it's that way since he put the patio blocks in. So it looks beautiful, but it floods. So now he starts crying. He wants you to cut the alley down. Well, he won because you guys came out last week and you cut it down. Well, now when I go out of my garage, my Corvette with that low profile fairing that's on the bottom gets close to that cut down. I could probably live with that if I fan it down a little bit more. You know, I could give and take. But these people around me, they're givers. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And what happens is, I'm gonna see all around me in the next 5 years, the 2 houses in back of me and the one that's next to me, they'll all be gone. And it's just because I got what I wanted, and now I sold for the top price that I got, because now I don't have that issue. They don't care about us, our neighbors. They care about their own self. Hey, could you cut this tree?
Mr.
That's
Ehrlich,
yours?
Mr. Ehrlich,
No,
there are
I'm not gonna do
there are
that.
2 other they're waiting.
Okay, these are the issues, and if we don't address them, a good idea about the $3,000 for the water system. We waited a few years on that one. I give you credit. We waited, now we got it. We know how much it's gonna cost each one of our houses. And again, I give you a lot of credit for fighting the issue of parking in this community, because it's a serious problem. If we're gonna build, you better build for parking. Thank you, sir, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Koplow. I live around Springfield and Greenleaf. I'd just like to make a very brief regarding the discussion of the abuse of parking spaces for people with disabilities. I'm very slightly disabled myself, because I'm really hard of hearing, so if I'm repeating something that was already said, I apologize. The mayor said something about, well, you can't tell who's driving. And I just wanted to point out that who's driving is irrelevant. It's a parking violation.
You're right.
The owner of the car gets the ticket.
You're
So
right.
to me, that seems like a non-issue.
You're right, it is. You're absolutely correct.
Good evening. Bob Cusel, 30-year Skokie resident. At the last meeting, Mayor Van Duzen cited the findings of the Ethics Commission as exculpatory regarding Trustee Johnson's ethics complaint. I find it worth noting that the first 2 meetings of the Ethics Commission were found to be violations of the Open Meetings Act. The first meeting, regarding allegations of an improper offer of a village position in exchange for Johnson dropping out of the 2021 trustee contest, still hasn't been correctly held. As such, I believe the public's right to hear the facts and participate regarding that issue continues to be denied. That should be rectified. Parenthetically, I'm troubled by the fact that the mayor unilaterally appoints every member of the Ethics Commission. As such, the mayor's selection of the people who are called to sit in judgment is a clear conflict of interest. He has chosen his own fact finders for complaints that include those pertaining to Mr. Lorge and himself. That's potentially a very heavy thumb on the scale, and I believe we can and should do better. And I urge the trustees to consider options for that process. As to Trustee Johnson's desire for a public conversation about the future appointment process for members of the legal department, that is clearly a matter of public interest, and that conversation must take place in open session. The Open Meetings Act draws a clear line of distinction regarding the performance of current employees, clearly executive session content, and matters pertaining to overall governance that should take place in the full light of transparency and public participation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And on the nomination to the Ethics Commission, I nominate, the board votes to confirm or not to confirm. And there are two members of the commission who are men of faith, and one is a rabbi, the other is a minister. The chairman is a lawyer.
So if I could briefly respond, I think any of us who go to traffic court would love to choose the judge. And basically, Mayor, if you nominate the members of that commission, you have a funnel through which those candidates flow. I'm just not sure that's in the best interest of a clear obstruction of a conflict of interest. We want to be as conflict-free as we can be. Anyway, that's my opinion. Thank you.
I'm not going to debate it.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brad Rosen. I live on the 8200 block of Keystone. Been a resident here for over 30 years. I've previously served on the Public Safety and Economic Development Commissions. And I just have, I guess I'm somewhat puzzled. You indicated, Mayor, that we are awaiting the determination of the Public Access Superintendent, a person with the Attorney General's office, before we can even have an agenda item to discuss matters surrounding the Corporation Counsel's office. I don't understand why that would be needed to have a public conversation about the Corporation Counsel's office that Trustee Johnson has brought up. So I would just urge you and the trustees to have that conversation, which obviously there's a great deal of public interest, much sooner rather
we are
than
going
later. And again, I don't understand why we have to await some kind of determination from somebody from the Attorney General's office. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And all of you for your service as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board? If not,
Would you have any response to my inquiry?
all I can say is a complaint was lodged concerning an executive session of the village board at which we took up the performance review of the Corporation Counsel. And we are not supposed to discuss in public those kinds of proceedings. That's why you have executive sessions. As soon as we know from the public access superintendent her determination, then we will hold that meeting. It's just a question of crossing the i's and crossing the t's and dotting the i's. That is all. And we had a discussion, pretty robust discussion, I would say, at the last village board meeting on the subject. So it's not as though we're not aware that the subject exists, and we have had a general discussion of it, but not a particular discussion of it.
It just strikes me that we're talking about multiple issues. You bring up the ethics complaints and the alleged or Open Meeting Act violations. It's my sense that Trustee Johnson is asking for a much more general kind of conversation. I don't know if you can clarify, Trustee Johnson. Thank you.
And and on the first ethics complaint, it was the first hearing that commission had ever held, because it was never, ever a complaint previously. And they did not understand how they should have proceeded. And as soon as we were informed it was corrected. And the commission now acts in a much more open way, I guess you would say. A more formalized way, I think is the better way to put it. But we certainly strive as best we can to be open and transparent, but we are governed by the Open Meetings Act, and we have to be very careful about how we address various subjects. That is all. I certainly understand that some of you are frustrated and you want to discuss and act on something tonight. Simply be a little patient. We are going to have that discussion, period. Trustee Johnson.
I'd like to clarify two things, because there's been a lot of discussions tonight about the Ethics Commission hearings and about this agenda process. In April 2021, I filed an ethics complaint with our Ethics Commission. They met at an illegal meeting that did not abide by the Open Meetings Act. There was no public notice, there was no public agenda, there was no opportunity for public comment. They dismissed my complaint. I received a 2 or 3 sentence response that did not have much of an explanation. The village has since acknowledged that this was an Open Meetings Act violation, and yet the commission has not met to re-review my complaint, my first complaint, for whatever that's worth. In regards to the agenda process, in October of last year, I requested that we have I publicly requested that we have a public conversation about our appointment process for village attorneys. I asked that this happen at our second meeting in December. It did not. It was blocked from the agenda, and it was moved to an executive session in which we discussed our performance review for our corporation council. At our second meeting in December, I am on the record in this chamber saying that I believe that if we did that it would be an Open Meetings Act violation and that we should not do that. We did it anyway. And so now we are being investigated by the Illinois Attorney General's office for a second time for Open Meetings Act violations, and that is, in my opinion, the excuse that's being used to deny my agenda item again. So it has been blocked a second time to await the determination of the perhaps improper meeting in which it was discussed the first time it was blocked. That is my perspective, for whatever it's worth, on these issues.
And obviously, I disagree, because we did discuss it. We discussed it at the last meeting. The proper forum for taking up the question, as Trustee Johnson did, was during the ordinance where we established compensation and benefits for the corporation council, the village manager, the deputy clerk. And we did do that. That was the form in which it should be taken. And I have responded at length to the Attorney General's office, and we are awaiting her decision. So, and that's the reason. As soon as we get that guidance from her, we will put it on the agenda.
If I may, I would like to provide a public comment myself. At our last meeting, I spoke a lot about our corporation counsel's office. I am, as you all know, I'm very strongly opposed to this board's historic practice of appointing political party and political campaign leaders to lead our public village legal department. As I mentioned at the last meeting, at its very worst, I think this practice has allowed elected officials on this board to collaborate with village attorneys to try to block political opponents from the ballot. If I may, I've already talked a lot about this issue, so tonight, if I may, I'd like to read some short selections of some of the written public comments that we received for tonight from people who are not in attendance tonight.
Aren't they already in the record?
They are. I'd like to share them. This is a quote from one Skokie resident who's not here tonight. Quote, as a lifelong resident of Skokie, I believe that the process for appointing village attorneys needs to be revised in order to make it explicitly nonpartisan and prevent abuses of power. It also needs to happen in the open, not behind closed doors, and needs to allow for public discussion. We have a case of patronage politics in Skokie. Another resident wrote, quote, it is not appropriate for the legal department, supposedly representing village interests, to be so involved in partisan politicking in the village. Indeed, these two roles should always be mutually exclusive, particularly given the risk that partisan issues can be allowed to trump what is in the best interests of the public the village is charged with serving. The fact that it's been this way since 1957 in no way justifies the practice, and it should be revisited publicly. The referenda passed in November demonstrate that Skokie residents overwhelmingly support nonpartisan government. The current legal counsel appointment process is anything but. Another resident wrote in and said, Trustee Johnson's first ethics complaint is not the first time I have been told of private meetings between Corporation Counsel Michael Lorge and members of the community who have expressed interest in exercising their right to participate in the democratic process. I am personally aware of at least 3 community members who have been encouraged by our Corporation Counsel to not run against his political party in exchange for commission appointments. At times, these individuals expressed feeling like this was not just a suggestion, but was an attempt to bribe them. This is not folklore. This is multiple community members reporting the same story.
And who are these people, may I ask?
They are all in public comments. It's in the public record. I don't know if I should say their names publicly, but they are all in the public record. Another person wrote in and said, based on the discussion at the March 7th meeting, it would appear that the village legal department is viewed as and used as a team of personal attorneys whose primary qualification is loyalty to the administration in office rather than the public good. It is unfortunately reminiscent of how our recent presidential administration politicized and personalized the Department of Justice at the expense of democracy, rule of law, and institutional integrity. I'll leave it there. I think it's time we take this up, and I'm looking forward to the discussion when it does come to this board, and I hope that when it does come to this board that we can have a really meaningful discussion about this and make some change that is really long overdue.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick comment. I think the last meeting was not a discussion. You just tried to convince us that Corporate Counsel Lorge is very competent, which we don't disagree with. It wasn't a discussion about the future, how we go ahead, and I agree with the one gentleman, it's not a cancel culture. We're not saying fire Mr. Lorge. We're saying we wanted to look forward to the future to figure out how, I always talk about optics. The optics are terrible. And okay, for me, it's all about optics and getting less and less trust in my government. And anyway, that's my comment.
Hi, my name is Maggie Vandermeer. I just have a really quick comment. I just wanted to point out that I noticed in the last meeting that there was actually interest from other trustees in having this conversation. I want to point that out because I feel like it's a very sort of like Trustee Johnson versus everyone else. And I thought it was really healthy that some of the other trustees were interested in having the conversation. And so I was disappointed that it's not on the agenda today. I don't know if I misunderstood you, but it sounds like you said that last meeting when the agenda item to review, and vote on, compensation for the Corporation Counsel was the appropriate time to have the conversation, but that wasn't a conversation last board meeting. Or were you saying that was, I guess I'm wondering what you're saying.
The time to discuss the village manager, the Corporation Counsel, is when we take up the compensation and benefits ordinance.
Okay, so why wasn't it discussed at the last meeting?
We did.
That was not a discussion.
Okay.
In fact, several of the other trustees said when Trustee Johnson suggested putting it on the agenda, they said, Trustee Robinson said, I'd be interested in talking more about this. And Trustee Kuhn said, can we make it not personal? There was very clearly a plan to talk about it.
And we're going to.
Okay, well, we'll be back for that.
That's the point. That's
Thanks.
the point. Trustee Sucker.
I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned.